Hello everybody! We are here today at the Drum Brother, as you can see, with the great Bruce Becker. How are you, man?
Nice, man. How you doing, Ali?
Pretty good.
How you doing, James?
Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Bruce is a great player and a great teacher, and today we're going to have a nice chat.
So Bruce, what's up with you recently? Are you having some sessions, some gigs, teaching a lot?
Yeah, you know, mainly these last few months I've been a little bit more active teaching. That's been one of my great passions, is to teach. You know, I've sort of carrying on a flag that was passed to me from Freddie Gruber. I had a lot of chance to spend time with him as a student for about 7 years or so, back in the late 70s into the early 80s. And then later on, in the mid to late 80s, I started to just hang with him and watch him teach. And by the 90s, 92, I moved to Europe, and I lived in Belgium for 4 years and Vienna, Austria for a year. And that's probably when I spent more time with Freddie in a concentrated sense, because he came to spend time with me and live with me. And we did a lot of clinics together. In fact, you saw one. I showed you one that I have, a very, very rare one. Freddie was in great form that day. But anyway, I've been teaching mostly a lot these days. I still do some good sessions in LA. My gigging schedule has slowed down a little bit, some by choice, some by just the changing landscape of the music business. But I've been working on an instructional DVD that talks topically about those kinds of things, about setting up the hands and positioning and the relationship of how we interact with the stick. And at the same time, I've been working on that book. And the book is different than the DVD. It's more about odd time concepts and philosophies and how somebody can develop certain things, because that's a very challenging subject for a lot of drummers. So I think I hope I've written it in a way that will give people some particular phrasings and ideas to think about to help develop their playing in that genre.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more in depth about the concepts that are into your book and DVD?
Well, the DVD, that really speaks about the different positionings of drum technique that we use and trying to illustrate the connection between them all. So if I talk about French grip approach, there are certain specific things that are inherent that we want to tap into, and that's balance and the positioning of the stick. What I always present is that we're trying to change our reflexes to respond to how we want them to respond, and also how they respond to the stick physically, in the sense of balance and the creating of momentum or movement. And so, you know, there are certain things that are very valuable to understand in that setup. The position of the stick in the hand in French grip, and the arm position, how that forearm is subservient to the bounce of the stick, you know. And I'll just illustrate a little move that will show the connection from French grip to German grip, and German grip back to French grip. And trying to use all the subtle nuances to make that connection to be really well understood and accessed. You know, if you can't access it, then how are you going to use it? And then, of course, I always say that in pursuing your technical studies, you're always driven by your musical influences and your musical experiences. You know, if you're only playing rock and roll and you say, well, I want to develop my jazz playing, if you're only working that from the standpoint of maybe working on some independence exercises on your drum set in a practice mode, and you're not playing jazz, you're never really going to be able to speak that dialect in a responsible or a correct way. Responsible, you know, meaning to take on the traditions of what has been already given to us from our great masters, you know. So, and, you know, in German grip, there are certain things, again, that are inherent to the positioning and how our anatomy works, and that means now that we can use the wrist. So we have certain things in German that can be well illustrated to support certain kinds of movement, and how we would use that in a drum set setting or a snare drum set setting. And, you know, really just working the two approaches. And then, of course, the third approach, traditional grip, which a lot of guys like, mostly jazz players, but there's a lot of guys who make a nice presentation of how to play a backbeat with that left hand in traditional grip. One guy that comes to mind is Steve Ferroni, now playing with Tom Petty. He gets a nice backbeat, a nice pocket. You know, Jojo Mayer is a a firm traditional grip player, Dave Weckl. But then there's guys, who play match grip, who play great too. Bill Stewart is a jazz player. He plays match grip. Now, I have seen him play a couple times where he sneaks into traditional grip, but it's usually for about 8 or 12 bars, and then he zips back into his normal match grip approach. So those kinds of things are going to be my depth of approach in the DVD, to really talk about how to set those things up and to manifest good changes in your playing.
In your drum career, which have been the things that influenced it most on your playing or on your vision of drumming? And
wow. Well, I've been carrying on a group with my brother David for now going on 30 years. And the crux of the group is contemporary jazz. So it's compositional stuff, but with an emphasis on some improvisation. And that's always driven me to explore more varieties of how to improvise, and also to be, free and flowing, as we all want to be in our drumming. But at the same time, I've always been a rocker as a kid. My first exposure to rock music as a kid at six years old, because my dad didn't let us listen to any rock until I was about 6. He was like this staunch, we must listen to classical music only. So when I finally discovered the Beatles, and also the Monkees, which Mark Shulman would attest to, those were big groups for both of us, and Mark's a really good friend. I know him all the way back then, before I even played drums, and before, I think, or around the time he started to play. But those things had a big impact as well, because I really wanted to fine-tune certain things about playing. When you listen to a drummer like Ringo, he has a certain personality. While we may say, well, he wasn't so technically great, he had certain things in his technical approach that were driven by the music he was playing. So I found that fascinating, and I wanted to access some of those things, or I wanted to access things by John Bonham, or other players as well. So I've always run these two paths of rock and jazz, and as I've moved along now, and I'm an older guy, I look back and I say, for a guy who just plays jazz, I think it's always important to investigate some of the higher points of rock and pop drumming. There's a certain organizational thing, a certain pocket and feel that we access through that music. And for a guy who only plays rock and pop, I think it's very important to understand and to study up the swing values and the traditions of the instrument, because the instrument comes from that swing period, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and then started to branch off into other areas. But that certain sense of swing that drummers like Buddy Rich and Papa Joe Jones and Big Sid Catlett, and names maybe some people know or they don't know, but those guys they're the forefathers. They're the branches or the roots of the tree. Very, valuable to understand how that works. So when you listen to a guy like John Bonham, for example, or Mitch Mitchell, rock drummers, they swung. They had a swing feel in their playing. And I think that, for me at least, when I look back, that's some of the great personality that really speaks volumes in their playing, and things that I thought were very valuable to develop. So to answer your question, what drove me, it's like those things. And then, locking in with different people, playing with different people inspire you. I played with Barbara Dennerlein, who's a Hammond organ player from Germany, and I played with her for about 2.5 years, doing a lot of clubs and festivals, and my brother and I have managed to play a lot of clubs and festivals throughout the years and do several recordings, and I've been blessed to play with certain people through the years, whatever. I mean, when you get into name dropping, it's not necessarily always the biggest thing, but, I'm not going to sit here and, do that. But I played with some great people, and I've been very fortunate, and I've taken all those experiences and tried to, every playing experience pushes me a little bit more forward, or recording experience,